incredible scenes we've seen play out across the United States in the last few days with riots, basically, and violent clashes at several US universities after protests, pro-Israel and pro-Palestine protests clashed. We've seen police in riot gear. We've seen 300 people arrested in New York alone. The scenes and the pictures and the videos, if you haven't seen them, are quite astonishing. This is not peaceful protest. These are not peaceful scenes. Let's talk more about all of this with Adele Grosso, a student who was arrested for trespassing at Columbia University during one of the pro-Palestinian protests. Adele, great to have you on the programme here on LBC Tonight. Thank you for coming on. You're joining us live from New York. What is it that you were protesting for or against, and why were you arrested?
Yes, so I do want to push back on the idea that we are not a peaceful protest. We have been completely peaceful and we have harmed no one, specifically us. We are protesting for our university to divest from Israel. We are protesting for our university to stop funding the bombs that are dropping on our loved ones. And we are protesting for our university to stop suspending students, to give our housing back. They've evicted students, and we're asking for them to reinstate faculty that's been suspended.
And you're doing that by staging sit-ins, effectively, by occupying territory.
Yes. So we started I'm so sorry if you can hear background noise. Started as being on the lawn, as to make our point clear and have leverage, but not disrupt daily activities as much as possible. And this was completely peaceful. At no point did we have any clashes. And our school made the decision to send in the NYPD for the first time since the 60s onto our campus to arrest us, and told the NYPD what charges to give us. And then since they cleared our camp, we switched over to another lawn and started it again. The university refused to continue negotiations with us in good faith and refused to listen to us. So students did decide that an escalation was necessary. We were very mindful to keep all of the student body safe. And we were very mindful that while property may have been destroyed, we were very mindful not to harm anyone.
But there's lots of ways to protest without destroying property, Adele, aren't there? Why have you chosen to take that approach?
So we started at the beginning of this conflict, we started by writing emails to our university and got no response. And so then we started peacefully protesting. And as soon as we started peacefully protesting, our university started banning our protests, started not allowing us on campus. And so we did have to then switch to protests that were not sanctioned. However, again, they were still peaceful. Because our university was still not listening, not willing to discuss this with us. And again, we really wanted a dialogue with our university where they listened to us as students and cared about an active genocide. And so our next step was to go into this encampment, which again, we kept it very contained. We kept it extremely safe. And again, there was no destruction at that point. Our university chose to arrest us for being peacefully in that
because you broke the law, presumably.
So no, we did not break the law.
So why have you been arrested for trespassing?
Yes, so we are all Columbia ID holders, and we were on Columbia campus, and the lawns were open. Our university decided to arrest us, but there's a good chance that the district attorney of New York will drop these charges because they are not legitimate. At this point, we had full access to campus and we were fully permitted to be there. They were simply resisting our peaceful action because they were unwilling to listen to their student body and care about an active genocide.
Listen to or agree with and accept all your demands? Because they're different things, aren't they? They might be listening and they might be saying, we hear you and we respect your right to say that. We completely disagree. And that's democracy. That's free speech.
Of course. But they they made it extremely clear through their communications with us, through the emails that we received, and through all of our communications with the university, that they actually did not that they were not open to talking with us, that they were not open to having a dialogue in good faith.
What?
And I also do want to note that our student body at Columbia has voted to divest with, I believe, an 85%. Don't quote me.
What do you want them to divest from or in, Maria Dal?
Divest from Israeli products and divest from the companies that are making bombs.
So anything that is made in Israel, you want your university to agree not to buy?
So currently our university is actually financially involved in a very serious way.
But if I'd said we are going to stop buying all US products because we don't like what Donald Trump is doing, you would have said, wouldn't you, you can't target all American people because you don't like what the government is doing. And yet you are targeting their ordinary Israeli people. They might despise the Israeli government as much as you. You are saying to small farmers, we're not going to buy your products because you happen to have a government that we don't like.
So just to continue my statement very briefly, but our universities have divested in the same way that in South Africa, when there was the apartheid in South Africa, there was a divestment from South African businesses. And that decision was made because South Africa was systematically oppressing people. We are asking our university especially to divest from the people making the bombs,
that's very different,
that are dropping on our loved ones.
That's very different to all Israeli companies.
I'm so sorry, may I just finish with
please.
I appreciate you pushing back. The additional aspect with Israeli companies is it's not the small organizations that we're getting in the United States. It's not the small imports. And at this point, many Israeli companies are using illegal settlements, and that would be our primary focus, is getting them to divest from things built in illegal settlements that are stealing Palestinian resources. I also want to note that this is a movement that is started by the people who are oppressed. So it's different than if you chose to boycott the United States because of Donald Trump, because at that point, the people in the United States who are being oppressed wouldn't have asked for that. So at this point, the people who are oppressed have asked us to make these steps, similarly to how South Africans who are oppressed asked to make those steps. And because of that, it's extremely important that we do so, because funding the Israeli economy means directly supporting a genocide.
But isn't the whole argument that we shouldn't hold innocent people responsible for the actions of their leaders? That's the argument that is rightly made in Gaza. Surely the same applies to Israel too.
I think it's more complicated than that when it comes to businesses, because businesses directly fund what's happening.
Right. So if Israel targets Palestinian businesses because they might be funding Hamas, that's legitimate, is it?
Well, for starters, they're simply not allowing. They're not allowing water. They're not allowing food. They're not allowing electricity. They're not allowing medical resources into Palestine, and that's a different thing. Secondly, again, what's being imported into the U.S. is not small companies. In the same way that many of us would say we should boycott, many of us at one point would boycott oil companies because of the oil spill. This is a similar action. And notably, again, these Israeli products, and I really advise you to look up the boycott, divest, and sanction list because it really does clarify each company that is on that list and why it's important to divest from those products.
Just lastly, are you campaigning also for boycotts and divestment from all sorts of other autocracies, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, the list could go on? Presumably you wouldn't want university to have any involvement at all in those countries as well. Are you campaigning for that too?
I mean, ideally, I would like the United States to stop their war machine. I would like the United States to stop funding genocides. But notably, again, the people being oppressed in Palestine chose to support or are the ones who led this boycott. And we haven't been, there hasn't been a request from Ukrainian citizens. There hasn't been a request from Saudi Arabian citizens.
There
for
definitely
us to
has,
make
Maria.
this
There
boycott.
definitely has been a request from Ukrainians, including the Ukrainian government, for nobody
Yeah.
to buy any Russian products, and yet
I
a lot
mean,
of people still are.
absolutely, I
But
don't
you're
think
not.
we should.
But you're not campaigning on that.
I actually do personally campaign on that, and I do believe that personally I wouldn't purchase products like that. I think we should divest from Russian oil. I think we should divest from these large, again, we need to stop the US war machine. The United States is sending these weapons into all of these zones purely to make profit. And that's unacceptable. And so the US is directly complicit in this.
What would happen to the likes of Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran if Israel didn't have any of the weapons that the US was sending it?
So, for starters, let me just form my thoughts for a moment. I think the first thing that we have to consider is that they are not, is that 40,000 Palestinians who have been murdered by those bombs are children and are primarily children.
They're not primarily children. Too many of them are children, but they're not.
They are primarily. Wait,
they're not.
I'm so sorry.
They're not primarily children. Too many children have died, of course.
Interrupt you. I was listing. I'm so sorry. I was going to say are primarily children, women, and disabled individuals. And according to the UN, recently they think that 300,000 children in Gaza are struggling with being mutilated from these weapons, struggling with starvation, struggling with lack of medical care, and all of that needs to end. There is no way to negotiate.
I agree, but I'm not arguing at all that far too many innocent people have died in Gaza. My question was, if the supply of weapons to Israel is completely cut off, what would happen to the likes of Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran? Would Israel be able to defend itself at all, or does that not bother you?
So for starters, Israel directly interferes in Palestinian elections. So it would be a very different situation if Palestine was allowed to have a more democratic system, because Hamas has in the past agreed to have a democratic system, and Israel has directly interfered with that. So that's one note. I also do believe that Iran would not be, you can look at this historically. Iran is not attacking Israel because they're attacking Israel. They're attacking Israel because Israel is attacking Gaza. And of course, I don't want any innocent civilians to die.
That's not true. Iran doesn't recognize Israel's right to exist.
I think Palestinians have a right to return.
Do you think Israel has a right to exist?
I believe Palestinians have a right to equal rights. I believe Palestinians have a right to return to their homelands. Since 75 years ago, Palestinians have been systematically forced out of their homes. And
do you think Israel has a right to exist?
I'm so sorry. I have a longer answer to this question.
Okay, but it didn't. With respect, it didn't sound like you were answering.
I appreciate that you believe that. It's a longer answer because it's a more complicated question.
Go on.
There's a difference between believing that Jewish individuals should be or have a right to be in Palestine, and believing that Israel as a country should be allowed to continue what they're doing. And I believe that the land is Palestine. I believe that. So
you don't believe that Israel should exist? You don't believe the world's only Jewish country should exist?
I want to note that there are Jewish Palestinians. There are Jewish Palestinians, and separatist states usually give other nations an excuse to be biased against Israel, biased against Jewish individuals, because they can say, you have this safe place, we can continue to be biased. And I do not believe that separatist states
What's
work.
a separatist state?
So a separatist state would be saying, here's a Jewish country.
Right, so the United
is
States is
also
clearly a
Jewish.
Christian country, isn't it?
But it is not. For starters, I believe that we should
So
be.
you believe that Christian countries should exist and Muslim countries should exist, but the world's only Jewish country shouldn't exist?
No. There is a difference between a country having a predominant population and a country labeling themselves as a Jewish country. And
the
then
United States clearly identifies itself as a Christian country, as does Britain, as do many other countries. Lots of countries clearly identify themselves as Muslim countries. There is one state in the world that identifies itself as Jewish, and you seem to think it shouldn't exist.